Our next speaker is Mark Castro, and he will be discussing with us the Trinidad Trail, recent work following the gold rush trails in Redwood National Park. Mark.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. I'm also short, so I gotta make this go down a little bit. Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Good morning, it's still morning, just checked. My name is Mark Castro, and I will be presenting my paper titled The Trinidad Trail, Recent Work Following the Gold Rush Trails in Redwood National Park. Perfect. So we all know the story of John Marshall finding gold at Sutter's Fort in January 1848, which was the impetus for the California Gold Rush. Tens of thousands of people from all across the globe came to California in search of riches. Less well known are the stories of the northern gold fields. In 1849, 4 prospectors, including James Abrams, a 15-year-old Englishman, briefly searched for gold on the South Fork of the Salmon River. Although they found some gold, they left the same year without a major gold strike after encountering trouble with the native population. Abrams returned the following year and became one of the key figures in early Salmon River gold mining and provisioning. Other prospectors had better luck in 1849. By July, there were about 300 miners in the Forks of Salmon area. It wasn't until the following year, however, that word about the Salmon River gold got out and prospectors made a big gold strike on the North Fork of the Salmon River, truly starting the Salmon River gold rush. The discovery of gold set in motion a worldwide rush of people and goods towards California within the first few years of the initial gold finds. The gold rush on a whole reshaped the course of history in California and later the nation, the US. Like no other development. Census records from 1850 show the majority of miners came from the United States, Mexico, Europe, and China. But people came from South America, like Chileans and Peruvians, and the Pacific. However, the early demographics for the gold rush are problematic since census records for many of the counties in California were lost. And there were also many people that were probably undercounted as well as miscounted under other groups. Of note, the foreign miners tax of 1850 removed many Mexicans and Chileans from the Mother Lode area and the southern mines, and other laws and policies had effects on foreign-born miners. Although my research to date failed to show how these policies affected the northern mines. One thing to remember is not only men were present in the gold fields, although less prevalent, women were also present. It was also not uncommon in the early days to find native women panning for gold in the creeks. Black miners were present in all of the gold fields to different degrees. Prior to September 1849, Southerners brought their slaves to the gold fields with them. This practice stopped about when California became a non-slave state. As soon as gold was discovered up north, miners needed supplies and quick, reliable access to the gold fields. Pack train routes were established from Trinidad and Union, which is presently Arcata, which were the 2 primary supply centers along the coast. The first major transportation routes went north from Trinidad, up the coast, cut inland above Big Lagoon, dropped into the canyon to cross Redwood Creek at the Tall Trees area, and then climbed steeply to the Bald Hills before dropping back down to the Klamath River, following its north shore until reaching Orleans, at which point people spread out to find a claim. This route has commonly been referred to as the Trinidad Trail, but the Trinidad Trail was actually multiple routes that had the name attributed to them. Once travelers reached the Bald Hills, it branched off into at least 3 different routes, including, depending on the season, that led down to the Klamath River, including the Williams Ridge route, Johnson's Trail, and the Capel-Morek route. According to Edwin Beers, The pack trails followed established transportation corridors, generally along ridge lines that had been utilized by local tribes, including the Yurok and Cholula in time immemorial. However, pack animals were not always capable of following these older trails, so new trails need to be constructed, as is described in the Journal of Leroy Kidder. Leroy L. Kidder was one of the 15-man trail crew led by Captain McDermott to cut the Trinidad Trail for the high volume of travelers that were bound for the gold fields. Captain McDermott had previously scouted out the route prior to meeting Kidder. The construction started in March of 1850. Kidder worked as a chopper for the trail crew, felling trees in the right-of-way. So the journey started in Trinidad. Following Kidder's arrival by ship from San Francisco, he stated that Captain McDermott came to our camp and informed us that he had met with his associates and they decided to employ 15 to 20 men to work their proposed trail. They would pay $18 per day for able laborers to furnish provision, the men to furnish their own tools and do their own cooking. He later stated, Captain McDermott in the lead to show us the way and also where he wanted work done. We soon came to some logs and brush that he required us to move. Soon we were on hand with our axes to remove some logs and chop a few trees, and before long had the trail through the first gulch clear of obstacles or anything that might be hindrance to mule travel. Okay. After leaving Trinidad, the trail crew improved the currently used trail to the lagoons and cleared down trees. When they hit Big Lagoon, they would make the arduous trip through the sand along the narrow strip of land between the lagoon and the Pacific Ocean, and then make camp at the northern end before climbing the nearby ridge. They would spend approximately 4 to 6 days in the redwood forest before reaching Redwood Creek. Kidder wrote, "We made such great progress with the work that it was found that our camp was getting far from our work, and after remaining only 2 nights in the redwoods, we struck camp again and moved into the heart of the forest and bid adieu to the Pacific and the lagoon." He later stated that the next day, our two brought us to Redwood Creek, to which place moved camp. Redwood Creek is a broad, shallow stream with gravel bottom at the point and as cold, seemingly, as ice itself. And the only means of crossing it was by wading. So one of our party drew off his boots, rolled his trousers up, and waded. He found it about knee-deep and declared that his legs were so numb that he could scarcely stand where he landed on the other side. This statement we were ready to verify when we had followed his example, the stream being 150 feet wide and cold. On the other side, we pitched our camp and got dinner, and that afternoon we devoted to the felling of a tree across the creek to serve as a bridge. There was but one tree that would fall the way we wished, and to that giant of the forest we applied ourselves. With 4 men chopping at the same time and changing off, it was nearly night when the old monarch began to weaken and went down with a great splash into the creek. But going down to the bottom of the creek and resting on the bank. After the tree was cut down, we measured the stump and found it to be 9 feet across, not including the bark, which was very thick. This was by no means a large tree as compared with its relatives and neighbors. Nearby, we stretched a rope across one that measured almost 98 feet in circumference and was, I think, the largest tree I ever saw. It was as solid and perfect as one could wish. After our tree was cut down, we cut other logs and placed them in between the end and the bank so that the mules could get off and on easily. This was a significant event as many of the early miners, such as Jacob Broadbeck, Thomas Roach, and Isaac Wister, describe using this crossing during the following warm months. Wister, in particular, describes a perfect bridge of about 10 or 12 feet wide, which was a godsend for him and his team of donkeys. Next morning, we were out on the trail and nearly finished the trail through the redwoods, distance of about 12 miles of the densest forest I had ever seen. The following morning, we struck camp, shouldered our belongings, and moved them out of the woods on a beautiful little prairie 4 miles distant from the creek. This we named Elka Camp because of having seen a herd of elk there, one of which was brought down by a rifle of one of our boys. For at least 10 years, this place bore the name, and it may still be known as Elk Camp. This place would be one of the major focal points in the Ball Hills for the pack trains. The work then continued to the Klamath and was hampered by a snowstorm that hit, and they continued to the goldfields. So in the map, you can see kind of the trail, and you can see how Elk Camp really does show up in newspaper articles and on all the maps that show up in the early days. Jacob Christoph Brodbeck, a Swiss miner, noted in his July 31st, 1851 entry, a lagoon extends about 4 to 6 miles between the sandbar, which one has to pass along the coast. If one could pass the lagoon with a boat, one could shorten the trip by about 6 miles. Up on a hill at the entrance of the so-called Redwoods, there is a rest stop where 2 Frenchmen operate a tavern tent. This would have been Redwood Camp. He later said, "On the 30th in the morning, we entered the Redwoods and arrived at Elk Camp. In the evening, weak and tired. The road through the Redwoods would be very pleasant if it would be an even plain, but instead, one had to hike over 2 mountains, not pleasant at all to climb." Jacob's descendants, Chris and Tom, visited California in the spring of 2011 to retrace Jacob's steps. Ned Simmons, Trinidad historian, and Michael R. Peterson, Park Service archaeologist, were there with them through parts of their journey. The Park Service has known about extant segments of the Trinidad Trail located near the Tall Trees Grove since the 1970s. In 2009, Michael R. Peterson, Jim Wheeler, and other park staff more accurately recorded the extant segments of the trail as well as associated features. In this picture, Jim Wheeler is pointing out the direction of the trail during this field visit. MPS staff also located a mule shoe, square nails, a few axe-cut stumps believed to be from the 1850s, several tree blazes probably from a later date, and a whiskey bottle was previously found by Simmons. In the fall of 2017, CRF conducted the Cultural Research Facility, CRF conducted a survey of a roads project in Redwood National Park that had the potential to locate the Trinidad Trail west of Redwood Creek. Peterson previously identified trail corridors, which you can see displayed on this map. These corridors are based on the topography that the miners may have followed. The C12 road itself was one of these alternatives, and it was checked thoroughly. Due to the heavy logging that occurred in the area between 1950 and 1980, we knew we were unlikely to find extant remnants of the trail as were recorded near the Tall Trees Grove by conventional survey methods. Due to the high likelihood of the Trinidad Trail previously running through the project area, especially at the southern end of the project area, crew members were tasked with identifying areas best suitable for metal detecting. The following morning, I went out with CRF Research Associate Jeremy McFarland and used metal detectors on a 7-acre area that was identified the previous day. This area was deemed as most likely to contain the route of the Trinidad Trail based on topography and historical maps. For areas previously destroyed by logging activities, metal detectors are necessary tools to find historic period artifacts that would have been dropped by miners and the pack trains. Following the survey, I spent several days at the Humboldt State University Special Collections Room to locate any pertinent documents that could further illuminate this trail. The diary of Leroy Kidder was one such gem that came out of this search, as shown by the excerpts that I have read today. To date, the documentary record has been more fruitful at illuminating the history and path of the Trinidad Trail. Moving forward, HSU will work with the Park Service to secure funding to continue our collaborative efforts to locate additional remnants of the Trinidad Trail, including the primary rest areas and stops between Big Lagoon and the Klamath, which are Redwood Camp, the Tavern Tent, and Elka Camp Blockhouse. Further archival research at Humboldt State University's Special Collections Room and other local repositories to look through newspaper articles, Klamath County records, and Ned Simmons' research will hopefully illuminate where exactly the trail once went. We could also use a least cost path analysis that utilizes LiDAR data in conjunction with known trail locations to establish the most likely areas for future field verification. Also, the use of magnetometers in the Bald Hills may be necessary to find the Elka Camp blockhouse that would have been burned down as a casualty of the Bald Hills War between 1858 and 1864. And I just wanted to take some time to thank Michael Peterson, archaeologist for the Redwood National Park, who has helped a lot with this direction of this research and in helping to find certain firsthand accounts. Thank you.